Hi, I'm nicodehaan, and welcome to Living a Primal Lifestyle, where we explore a return to a more balanced and natural wild world.
To recover our natural health and regain our rights and freedoms. Good morning, I'm Ellen Dehaan.
And it's a beautiful day in downtown Durango. It's about 40 degrees, but up here in the mountains, it's 38 degrees. Durango West, 2.
Yeah.
And it's going down to about 20 tonight, and there was a little snow on the ground this morning.
Dusting of snow.
Yeah, that was kind of cool.
It's already melting, and the sun is up, and everything's. And the nice part was our driveway and walkways were completely clear this morning, even though there was a dusting on the grass.
That's because we're facing south.
Yeah, and across the street they had snow on their walkways. So
yeah, I didn't have to dust it, or undust it, I guess. Anyway, it's tomorrow's Thanksgiving, so we're years ago was always getting together with family. Was going to see my parents, and after my parents passed away, then actually my dad.
You're always your sister.
Yeah, we went to my sister's after my dad passed away, and my mother was there for many years. And then when she passed away, it was just Jim and Corey, and the kids would come sometimes, and it was always good memories, that's for sure.
Yeah, and Black Friday was our family tradition. Everybody went out and bought Christmas presents and filled up the trunk of the car.
Yeah, and it's different now. The last few years, we've been just visiting friends, which is really nice in Florida. And now we're in the mountains. We're kind of alone. But
for this year.
Yeah, this year. So we'll see what happens, but we've got plans. We're going to be cooking tomorrow, and I decided to cook a leg of lamb.
Yeah, we're going to try something new.
Yeah, try something new.
No point in cooking a big turkey for 2 people.
No, that's for sure. And we don't really eat the breast part anyway.
No, we like the dark meat.
Dark meats with the fat in it. So
yeah.
Anyway, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Hope you're going to enjoy the holidays and take a little time off and see some friends and family. That's what Thanksgiving is all about. So today we've got a few articles in here, and the first one is research sheds new light on the effects of dietary restrictions. And of course, all these things are in the show notes on YouTube, so you want to follow along, you can just click on one of those things, open it up, and you'll see what we're talking about.
Yeah, or look at it later.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about this article is what it's really about is anti-aging and staying young and vibrant and healthy and as you age chronologically. And it talks a lot about muscle health and strength.
Yeah, so this research is done by Eric Rogers, PhD, who studies cellular and molecular mechanics of aging at MDI Biological Laboratories in Bar Harbor, Maine. He has discovered that muscle may be a protected tissue under conditions of dietary restrictions. Now, this is important because, of course, we have people that do restriction diets, or we've been doing 1 or 2 meals a day for quite a while. And we feel this helps in the aging process. And here's some evidence to the fact that when you restrict your calories or even go on a fast for 1 or 2 days, that your muscles aren't compromised. And this is really the key. And one of the things that he says in here, which is very interesting, is that muscle may be protected under conditions of nutrient scarcity in order to support the ability of an organism to forage for food.
So we're talking about from an evolutionary perspective.
Right.
If there's food scarcity and you can't get enough food during the winter or whatever it was in our ancestors' times, and they still needed to be able to function. They needed their muscles to be strong so they could find whatever food there was.
You need to find what's missing, in a sense.
Yeah, well, you had to sustain the tribe and yourself.
And of course, there's a lot of people doing calories restriction and also doing fasts. Some people do a wet fast, which means you're drinking liquid. Some people do a dry fast where you're not having anything at all. And a lot of people think, well, that's kind of crazy. A lot of people think, well, this is new evidence showing the reason why people are doing this. And that's the important part for me. And I've always kind of known, because after a little while, when you don't eat, you start feeling really, really good. And of course, we've talked in the past about the body being able to regenerate itself. In other words, it takes a rest from the digestive process. And during that time, your body gets to regenerate itself. It gets to working on things that need repair, perhaps.
Yeah, well, and what they're talking about in today's world is dietary restrictions in which calories are restricted without malnutrition. And it's considered one of the most robust anti-aging interventions because when you're confronted with a scarcity of nutrients, the organism conserves resources by lowering the production of proteins, which is one of the most energetically expensive processes in the cell. And the proteins are the building blocks for the tissues and organs, and they perform vital physiological functions. But then the question was, are you jeopardizing your muscle strength at the same time?
Exactly.
And the studies are showing that that is not the case.
Yeah, the results suggest that it may be possible to develop anti-aging drugs that prolong a healthy lifespan without the loss of muscle tissue. They also offer insights to the mechanisms underlying the longevity promoting benefits of exercise, and also conversely the drawbacks of being an animal model equivalent of a couch potato. So not only can you function, but you can exercise, I would say moderately, but not maybe to the extreme. But let's say if you're hungry, you haven't eaten for a couple of days, and now you need to take a large animal down. That's probably strenuous work too.
Well, no doubt about it. There's no probably about it. It most definitely requires running and chasing and then catching and subduing and cleaning and
and if you're on the other side where you're just working for a meal that may not include animals, maybe you're foraging for vegetables or tubers or things like that. That's not easy work either. You're bending over, you're stooping down, you're getting up and going down, and there's a lot of things happening there.
So the equivalent of maintaining muscle strength in our primal ancestors would be doing some moderate exercise, walking, running, just doing your workouts, take the dog out for a walk.
Sure.
Yeah,
it doesn't mean that when you're doing a calorie restriction or even fasting that you can still be active.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a well-known syndrome that occurs when, for example, when women are professional athletes, or at least that's even at the college level, whatever, if they're actively engaged in sports on a regular basis, they have something called athletic amenorrhea, that the women athletes who exercise excessively, and they say excessively, meaning certainly on a much more regular routine and with more intensity and strenuous, they stop having their menstruation. So it's an interesting phenomenon, and but it's at the same time.
I thought always this was a case of, because they're performing at such a high level, now the reproductive process kind of stops for a while that's going on, because you're spending so much energy on the other side of the activity. That was my thought on it.
I think and I would think that it has to do with the loss of iron from the body, some of the things that are expelled during the menstrual process.
They want to keep that.
They want to keep that,
sure.
and so that kind of makes sense to me. I don't really know.
Yeah. It also talks about the anti-aging drugs. Over the past decades, significant research has been focused on the anti-aging potential of a drug called rapamycin. And we've talked about that because we've been taking the NAD plus and the transresveratrol. Yeah. And those things are to produce the rapamycin, which has been really shown to add to your longevity. So this article is very interesting on that part.
So they're saying that one potential application of this whole process may be the treatment of sarcopenia, which is a potentially debilitating age-related loss of skeletal muscle. And so they're just kind of emphasizing the fact that you can't forget about your muscles if you are not eating fully.
Well, if you go to an extent where your body needs nourishment and you're not giving it to it,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to get it from somewhere, and
Sure.
it's going to take it from your own body,
Sure.
which is the protein, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next article is the team uses AI, artificial intelligence, to develop the ultimate chickpea. This comes from Margaret Pulse from Queensland, Australia. And we know that Queensland or Australia itself has a big market for chickpeas, which they ship to
second highest
in the world, I would say.
in the world.
Yeah. So using artificial intelligence, researchers have developed a genetic model for the ultimate chickpea with the potential to lift crop yields by up to 12%. So they want to find the largest pea and keep reproducing that.
Well, they want to find the pea that creates the largest seeds and the most viable seeds for the best crop yield.
Right.
Yeah, all right, here's an interesting fact that you may never ever need to know. There are 1,582 individual genes in chickpeas. There are quite a few varieties of chickpeas. There are more than 3,000 cultivated and wild varieties of chickpeas.
Yeah.
And they like the chickpea because it's a rotation crop.
Right.
And it produces its own nitrogen to self-fertilize, so that reduces the need to add for the nitrogen fertilizer.
Yeah, they can use part of it in the reproductive process where they till the soil with some of that in there. Mm-hmm. Chickpea, of course, has a good protein that if you ferment it, it produces a compound that is your body accepts really well without
sort of a little bit of pre-digestion.
Yeah.
Would that be hummus?
Hummus is made from chickpeas, sure. And most of the desert communities have been using chickpeas for a long time because, as you know, in the deserts, the animals are scarce. So now you have to supplement that. The reason I like this article is because it brought to mind that we want as much diversity as possible in our food. In other words, we want to use different kinds of food to expose our bodies to the best nutrition, and it's not going to get used to one thing. So I'm wondering if this type of thing where we're trying to select the best one and only using that one is really good in the long run.
Well, I don't think it's not. It's really, if you think about it another way, it's an amalgamation of the best qualities of the different chickpea varieties.
Right.
It's not necessarily saying, well, we're going to pick this one and use that. And I think they'll continue to tinker with it. But
variety is what we've always known is the best for longevity, for our best health. We want to expose ourselves not to the same thing. That's one of, if you read a lot of the things on the forums about health, is get as much variety as possible. So if you're not including variety in this, maybe you're including it from a chemical sense because you're putting this in and that in, but you're still growing that same one. It's like growing the same potato over and over again, or eating the same animal over again.
The way nature works is that it will never be the same one. That there'll be mutations and changes and so on as it
But
as
they're
it evolves.
trying to eliminate
no,
that.
I understand. This is what you call genetic modification and GMO, and it also raises the question of, well, it raises a few questions for me. Number one, are we looking to address the possibility of food scarcity in the future?
Right. Well, I think that's the reason for this, yes.
And then the second one is, are we looking to maximize the crop yield for profit?
Oh, of course. Not only for profit, but because it's going to be available. It's not going to be scarce. So in times when all evidence shows that we're going the wrong way and we're diminishing our food supplies, especially around the world, it's not as much, in the United States here, we have these big food banks. And we are of the opinion that local food is much better. So we don't rely on that. We don't want to go to these large companies. We want to go to the small companies that are local. And let's distinguish between a food bank, which is a local
clearinghouse
Right.
for the farmers and the growers of the crops, and for the meat, for the vegetables, for the fruits in season, and versus the kind of food vault,
Well, I'm
where
also
you keep grain
yeah.
and
But I'm also looking like bananas from Brazil here in Durango. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
But they're yummy.
Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Right. But when the food, if you're relying on that and all of a sudden the boats don't come anymore,
Yes,
then of course,
yes.
yeah. So it makes much more sense from an evolutionary standpoint to get your food locally.
Well, and then while we're also
that.
talking about kind of influences on food production, we have the changes in the climate. If the food can't be raised where it's traditionally been raised now in farmlands and whatever, if eventually it becomes colder and colder in those areas, there's places like Australia that are able to supply these foods to other parts of the world.
And it makes sense, but is it good from a standpoint of being healthy? If you're going
chickpeas, I'm not so worried.
I understand that. But what I'm saying, of course, is during the wintertime, we're not going to be growing a lot of food and the animals are not going to be quite as healthy. So what we have done as human beings always is store some local food and use that during the year. And then the springtime comes and then you've got a new supply of food. So, not counting on the things from Brazil or from Australia for us here. Let's keep it in Australia. That's the ultimate thing. Is that going to be possible in the future? Who knows?
Well, that was the point, was that there'd be enough for Australia to eat the chickpeas, and then will there be surplus? Can you create surplus?
Well, Australia exports a lot of those things, of course. It goes with any food. So next article on here is scientists are mystified and wary as Africa avoids the pandemic disaster type of thing. We want to avoid certain words that that YouTube may not.
We don't wanna.
So
it's interesting that it seems, first of all, throughout the less developed sections of Africa, there's much less access to vaccinations.
Correct.
And
especially this vaccination that we're talking about. And it says here that the disease is gone. When did you last hear of anybody dying? And this is from Africa.
From Zimbabwe.
Yeah. He says, the mask that I'm wearing is to protect my pocket. He says, the police demand bribes, so I lose money if I don't move around with a mask.
So you have to carry a mask, but not actually wear it.
You have to have it on you. Earlier this week, Zimbabwe recorded just 33 new cases and 0 deaths, in line with the recent fall in the disease across the continent. It's interesting because in Africa, and we're talking about the middle of Africa, not South Africa, which is highly developed.
Highly westernized.
Yeah. They only have 6% of the vaccinations there.
6% of the people have been
vaccinated. So they're very, very low, yet they don't have the problems that we're having in the Western society at all. Now, is this related to things like the malaria drugs that they're using, which we know is ivermectin and all these other ones, quinine maybe. They also have the river blindness disease, which uses similar types of drugs. So because these are being used there,
is that one prophylactically to prevent the...
Exactly. So is this the reason that they don't have it, or is the vaccine the reason?
Yeah, and it can't be the vaccine because it's 5% of your entire population is vaccinated.
No, but I'm saying in the Western world, it's the vaccine that also carries it, because we have another article that we'll go to talking about some of the results.
Stick to this for just a minute. The interesting, it's basically whoever got it, built up immunity. The people are not overalls during the entire time that this has been an issue. There's, it says in the past few months in Nigeria, there were 3,000 deaths so far among 200 million people. Now, that is a very, very small number of deaths. And that's so far, meaning throughout the whole entire, throughout the entire spread of the disease. So
It's one of the WHO describes Africa as one of the least affected regions in the world, and they're doing very little of what we're doing.
Who says data shows deaths in Africa make up 3% of the global total, and in comparison, deaths in the Americas and Europe, in Americas it's 46%, and in Europe it's 29% of the total. In the number of deaths so far and during the entire pandemic has in Nigeria has been 3,000, and that number of deaths is recorded every 2 or 3 days. It was being recorded every 2 or 3 days in the U.S.
Yes.
And this is the whole entire year and almost 2 years.
So this kind of brings up the question: would have we been better off if we just did nothing?
Well, I mean, who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, exactly. You don't know. It says here we went into this project thinking we could see a higher rate of negative outcomes in people with a history of malaria infections, because that's what we've seen in patients co-infected with malaria and Ebola. We are actually quite surprised to see the opposite, that malaria may have a protective effect. Now, I don't think that's the reason. I think
it's the drugs they take to prevent malaria have contributed to and one fellow in Nigeria was quoted as saying that they said there were going to be dead bodies in the streets, but nothing like that happened.
Right.
And
this is the scare tactics that a lot of people use.
Seems like it.
I think there's a different cultural approach in Africa where these countries have approached the disease with a sense of humility because they've experienced things like Ebola, polio, and malaria. Mm-hmm. So they're very
careful.
Not
anything new.
Right.
Yeah, highly contagious.
In the past months, the coronavirus has plummeted.
You said it.
Yeah, I know I said it. Has pummelated South Africa and is estimated
Pummelated? Where are you?
Right here.
In the past?
Pummeled.
Pummeled.
Dyslexia. South Africa is estimated to have killed more than 89,000 people there, by far more than the deaths on the continent. So that's talking about South Africa, which is heavily
industrialized, westernized,
and vaccinated.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just more information, hopefully people who are in a position to make decisions are paying attention to all the sides and all the data that's coming out.
Yeah, it says that this doesn't mean, however, that vaccinations aren't needed in Africa. We need to be vaccinating all the people there.
Even though they don't have it or they had it and they're fine, even though there's no deaths occurring. And so, and we have to be, and this epidemiologist in South Africa says, we have to prepare for the next wave. Well, there hasn't been a wave.
That's right. So there is no next wave. It might be the first wave. Maybe everything is delayed and maybe they'll see it later. We just do not know because so many different
there's varieties, there's changes, and data is skewed or not forthcoming.
Yeah. I haven't seen any cases lately. This gentleman says Afghanistan has recorded about 7,200 deaths among its 39 million people. He says, although there's little testing has been done amid the conflict that arises there and the actual number of cases. So they're talking about other countries in comparison, even though I would say Afghanistan is not a Western type nation.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of poverty, a lot of war.
But in Africa, is there a lot of poverty? You always hear about, that these people they're living on the edge there too.
Yeah, especially when they're outside of the cities, and even in the cities, it can be worse. At least outside, you might have a little land to grow something on.
Yeah. So the next article is the FDA produces the first 91 pages of documents from Pfizer's vaccine file. So this is interesting because
the first couple of paragraphs.
Yeah, the couple of paragraphs were really, I don't know quite what to think of it. They first of all said that they were ready to take complaints, and they were fully staffed for these complaints. And then they said, he said, as the volume of reports for the first 2.5 months, Pfizer received a total of 42,086 reports containing 158,893 events.
Events in quotes.
Yes, most of these reports were from the U.S. and
Disproportionately
involved women.
And those between the age of 31
About
and
3
50.
times as many women have reported side effects that are detrimental.
It's more than that. There's 30,000, roughly 30,000 women and 9,000 men.
That's 3 times as much.
3 times 9 is 27.
Well, and it's 29, so it's about 3 times.
Okay.
And those ages for the women were between the ages of 31 and 50, so younger, not older. Because if you look at the older groups, it's a small percentage of that.
Yeah, all the other age groups combined were about 8,000 more than the total number of women between 31 and 50 years old.
Yeah, and a lot of these afflictions were nervous system disorders. He says that sounds familiar. As a matter of fact, it sounds similar to the concerns raised by some women testifying or describing in the video below. And there's a video in here talking about that.
Yeah,
but it says, Pfizer says there's no cause for alarm. And they explain to the FDA the findings of these signal detection analysis are consistent with the known safety profile of the vaccine. So they said they knew these issues ahead of time. So why are they scrambling for people to take the reports? They didn't have enough people, it says here in the article, to take the reports. There were so many reports that they had to restaff themselves. So if they knew ahead of time,
and they would not disclose how many additional people they put on board.
Right.
But the other thing we've been watching some of the interviews and the reports of. I mean, it seemed like what was happening was there was a checklist of possible side effects, and so if you had any of those, they checked it off. Fine, here's the report.
Right.
Okay. However, the side effects were so different and so much more intense and dangerous in some cases.
Yeah.
But they weren't on the checklist.
No.
So they didn't get reported. They got reported, but didn't go into the report.
Where they had a standard checklist of these are the symptoms that we're looking for.
Yeah.
But there were so many different symptoms that weren't on that list.
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't disclose what those symptoms were or what those.
Yeah. Now, if you do a little research, you can see quite a number of reports from doctors and from real life case studies, things that happened to people when they took the vaccine, and it's been an issue. And
yeah, so these are interesting things that you really don't hear about on the mainstream too much. You're still hearing the same old things. Let's get vaccinated, and whether that's bad or good, we still don't know.
Don't know.
Maybe we'll know in 20 years, and see what the offsprings bring. People who are.
I think we need to move on to something more.
Maybe so. Well, here's an interesting article, and
seeing as how it's Thanksgiving.
That's right. Should you be fixing turkey or tofurkey? Tofurkey.
That's tofu turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, fake. I don't know. The combination of letters in the word tofurkey is unfortunate, in my opinion.
Well,
it brings to mind other words, and
I see what you mean now.
has a very negative connotation.
Well, of course, the big push is always to go to fake food. Manufactured food, which we know that if you listen to the experts, we're saying don't eat processed food. The less processed food that you're going to eat, you're going to be better off. And of course, all these fake meats are processed food. So it just doesn't make any sense. But I think a lot of people are going to probably try some of this for the main course.
Well, first of all, it's the tofu brand products are significantly cheaper per pound.
Yeah.
And allegedly they taste very similar.
Well, they're putting artificial flavorings in there. Tofu traditionally has been a source of replacement for meats that weren't available to the Far Eastern peoples of the world. And they did this starting maybe 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. And they figured out how to do it. And tofu is a very high fermented soybean that is fermented in a real slow process of 5 to 7 years. that they put them in vats with salt water. A lot of times in the beginning, they put it in the sea. So it's a big process. And why did they go to this process that took a lot of time? If you're putting something underwater for 7 years, you're really thinking this whole process out. And you're thinking, well, this is the reason I'm doing this is for my health and for my sustainability. We don't have the deer anymore as much. Maybe we have some. So we want to supplement. And we figured out that fermenting these soybeans will give us the same type of proteins that are easier to digest and give us life.
Yeah.
Now, the question is, are they using this type of product to make the turkey burgers or whatever they're doing with it? I'm thinking, no, they're not going to wait 7 years.
Right.
They're going to figure a fast process. And are they even fermenting it? There's no indication
it's
here.
It's made from soybeans, and allegedly from the soybeans that have been converted to tofu, but we don't know the process.
No, we don't know the process. They're not going to divulge that. It's probably patented. So, you're not going to you're not going to have that information. So this is, again, another sign that I think we're going in the wrong direction. Will it help feed the world? Perhaps it will. Maybe in the future we'll figure out maybe better methods of doing this. But this is a wave of the future, and it's here. There's some graphs in here that are interesting about prices of soybeans.
It says here, in the third quarter of 2021, a hearty Thanksgiving dinner serving of turkey costs $1.42. A tofurkey dinner serving with the same amount of calories costs 66 cents and provides almost twice as much protein. Now, again, that's plant-based protein.
Right.
Not,
and keep in mind that this plant-based meal would be almost 3 times larger by weight. So then you're not getting the nutrient density that we have with perhaps a turkey.
Maybe you thought you ate too much when you ate the turkey.
Yeah.
Imagine the possibilities there. But it also says, and it could provide you with more leftovers. So, and the calculations do not include time.
I'm thinking
energy.
There's more leftovers because people are not going to eat it.
No.
No. So, I don't know.
I don't know. It's good to have alternatives. It's good to supplement. It doesn't hurt to.
Well, we don't even eat the turkey anymore. We kind of gave that up, and if we go to somebody else's house, we'll eat the leg part or
the thigh. We like the dark meat.
Yeah, the dark meat because of the fat, and there's not as much tryptophan in there, so you're not going to get as sleepy either. So let's go on then to the next article, which
Speaking of Thanksgiving.
There's 2 articles here. One is a little bit easier to digest, Thanksgiving 2021. The other one is called The Myths of Thanksgiving Story and the Lasting Damage. They imbue.
The whole story of Thanksgiving with the Pilgrims landing, being welcomed with open arms by the Indians, sharing their first Thanksgiving meal together, and so on is actually, number one, it's not timeline actually factually correct.
No,
and
not
number
at all.
2, the actual interaction and the motivation for it and so on.
Well, the motivation for the tribe getting together with the white people was so the tribe wouldn't be attacked by other tribes.
Yeah, they were looking for allies.
And this stems back to the whole thing when the white man started coming over here, and those were mainly the Dutch, the Spaniards, and the English, and maybe the Norwegians and those way earlier. They brought disease with them. And the disease is the first thing that kind of went across the Mississippi River. And in fact, they say 100 years before the white man touched the Mississippi River, already there was half the population was gone in the western United States because of the smallpox and the other things that they had never, ever been exposed to.
They had no antibodies, no immunity.
Exactly.
And but there was also the concept of there were raiding parties, slave raiding parties, way before the Pilgrims got here.
That's right.
And
in fact, one of the passage in here mentions that one of the Indians came back after he had escaped from Spain, went to England, and then went on an exploratory mission with some of the white men and landed back into Plymouth. And
or somewhere in America,
Yeah.
in Virginia, whatever. And then they also talk about in the article the fact that some of the Indians actually spoke English when the Pilgrims got here.
Yeah.
Which clearly indicates that they had been exposed extensively to.
So first of all, there was no first Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah, and that was the other thing I found fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
They said that the first winter, the Pilgrims lived on the boat.
Yes.
They had no idea how to grow food or how to do anything, and they lived on the boat. And half of the people who came across never made it to the American soil because they died on the boat from scurvy and from diseases and from exposure and so on.
Yeah, and of course the voyage. How long did that take?
66 days.
66 days in the Atlantic. I remember in 1951 when I came over with my mother and my sister. It was just, I think it was 7 or 8 days, and we were there actually 2 days longer because some woman had jumped overboard and committed suicide, so they went looking for her. But I remember it was not a...
wasn't a luxury cruise.
It was definitely not a luxury. I don't think they had many luxury cruises at that time, especially for immigrants who were in the bottom sections of the boats. And I remember it was a traumatic journey. It was, and we were on a modern vessel, so
on an ocean liner.
Kind of thing.
It was not a.
It was not the Viking
cargo.
cruise.
A cargo hold.
No, it wasn't cargo. Nothing like that.
Right.
Nothing like the Titanic stories.
Yeah.
So in here they go along with how did this become an interesting story? What is the Thanksgiving myth? And the myth is that, of course, there were friendly Indians here. Indians were fighting with each other already because they were already being compromised. They were already had diseases of the white man, and they were all looking for prime territory.
And it was very interesting because the whole culture clash was significant. The native people who were here had a concept of what was their territory, and they didn't own individual lots. They just knew where their property stopped and the next tribe's property started.
Right.
And when apparently the English came in and offered them money for their land, and they thought that, okay, great, we'll share it with them.
They thought that we were kind of renting it. You could be here, you could be sharing it. Yeah.
Share it, and of course the English said, okay, now it's mine, you get off.
Right. That's another thing.
That
Yeah.
was something.
The white man just never had a good idea of how to get along with people. They just took things over. And all the European countries kind of did this whole thing. This is something, these people don't own this land. They don't have any documents.
Right. So
so we took it over. And that's not a great story either.
They talk a lot about Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving was the second article is very interesting because it talks about the fact that Thanksgiving was basically a harvest holiday. And it had been celebrated by people all over the world for centuries.
Right.
And so it was, and it was a religious holiday too. It was a day of, in many cases, it was not a day of feasting. It was a day of fasting, Thanksgiving, and focusing on prayer and making your life better and reflection and so on. And so that's interesting. They say historians have recorded other ceremonies of thanks among European settlers in North America that predated the Pilgrims. In 1565, there was a Spanish explorer who invited members of the local Temecula tribe to a dinner in St. Augustine, Florida. And after holding a mass to thank God for his crew's safe arrival.
So it wasn't till years later, they had the second Thanksgiving celebration in 1623 to mark the end of a long drought that had threatened the year's harvest.
Yeah, there were just so many different rituals and dinners and whatnot, and they were on different dates too. They were early December, they were end of November. It just depended when the harvest came in.
It was in 1817, New York became the first of several states to officially adopt the annual Thanksgiving holiday, each celebrated on a different day, however, and the American South remained largely unfamiliar with the tradition.
This was fun too. It says, during the American Revolution, the Continental Congress designated one or more days of Thanksgiving a year. In 1789, George Washington issued the first Thanksgiving proclamation by a national government. He called upon Americans to express their gratitude for the happy conclusion to the country's War of Independence and the successful ratification of the U.S. Constitution. And then John Adams and James Madison, during their presidencies, also designated days of thanks. 1817, New York became the first of several states to adopt an annual Thanksgiving holiday, but everything was celebrated on a different day.
In 1827, a noted magazine editor and prolific writer, Sarah
Josepha Hale.
Author, and among countless other things, she authored the nursery rhyme "Mary Had a Little Lamb," which started a campaign.
She launched a campaign.
Yeah, she launched a campaign to establish Thanksgiving as the national holiday.
But then it took her 36 years to persuade, after writing to governors and senators and presidents, and she was dubbed the mother of Thanksgiving. Finally, in 1863, Abraham Lincoln heeded her request at the height of the Civil War, and in a proclamation, he entreated all Americans to ask God to, quote, commend to his tender care all those who become widows, orphans, mourners, or sufferers in the lamentable civil strife, close quote, and, quote, to heal the wounds of the nation, close quote. And then he scheduled Thanksgiving for the last Thursday in November, and that was until 1939.
That's when Franklin D. Roosevelt moved the holiday up a week in an attempt to spur retail sales during the Great Depression.
And it was known as Franksgiving.
I never knew that before.
No. And finally, in 1941, he then signed a bill making Thanksgiving the fourth Tuesday in November. Yeah. Of course, now Thanksgiving is... it's a time of, it's Black Friday, it's going shopping for Christmas presents, it's getting together with family and friends.
Yeah. And that's the real key, I think, and that's what it's always been for us. It's just getting together with people that you haven't been living with. Usually you travel a little bit and you go see your relatives, maybe your parents or maybe your children, whatever the case may be.
It's interesting, too, because as America evolved, the families all lived in the same town. So it was no problem for them to get together on holidays.
Right.
And
a lot of them lived in the same house for generations.
May have in some cases. And today, after the dispersal of people, thanks to the railroads and the road system and job opportunities that were elsewhere, people began moving, and then you started with the whose family do we go to, and who gets to have Thanksgiving and who gets to have Christmas or whatever. And it was sometimes it's not as peaceful and as great.
Well,
as
we always
grateful.
Had a good time at our Thanksgiving.
Oh, we did. Yeah, we did indeed.
Yeah. And it's always interesting to, you haven't seen these people. Maybe you've seen them a couple times a year, but during that time, it's the beginning of the holiday season, which is a 6-week period till New Year's Eve that is kind of special in the United States, even in Europe.
In a lot of places.
Yeah, most Westerns.
There are a number of different holidays that are celebrated in that time period.
Yeah, with the different religions and everything. But it's a time of getting together. It's also a time where in North America, it's wintertime. So things have been enclosed a little bit more. You don't go outside quite as much. So then I remember the nice things is the smells. When you come into the house, you can smell the turkey. You can.
In our house, this is a vivid memory from when I was in high school, junior high and high school, and my mother would start cooking the turkey. And the smell would pervade the house. It would take hours for the turkey to cook.
Right.
So, and we'd be starving just smelling that turkey. So the kids, the three of us, we would go for a walk And it was in the Boston area. It was cold, and we'd bundle up and we'd go walk. And I don't remember much snow or anything at that time, particularly. I just remember going for a walk to get out of the house and away from that smell so that we weren't.
Yeah. My sister did the same thing. And I remember she had made a video. I think her and Jim had made a video of her going out the door for a walk, and it was snowing out and stuff like that. And during her walk, this huge blizzard comes out. So when she comes back, she's just bundled up and she's completely frozen, could hardly talk. And of course, Jim had the camera out. And I'll never forget that. It was so funny. Oh, what a ride. Those are good memories.
One of our friends was telling me yesterday a fun story about how Grandma was always the center of the family. For 50 years, Grandma made Thanksgiving dinner. Everybody came to Grandma's house wherever she was. And then last year, Grandma told everybody, I'm not doing Thanksgiving this year. I'm going to Las Vegas. Okay. And everybody thought she was kidding.
Oh, but she wasn't.
And they all showed up at her house, and she was not there.
Wow.
She was in Las Vegas.
Wow.
So they're calling her up and saying, Grandma, where are you? And she says, I'm in Las Vegas. I told you I was going to Las Vegas.
I'm at the Jack at the table, throwing the dice. Okay, so that's enough about Thanksgiving.
Well, no, I do want to focus on something a little more positive here for Thanksgiving.
Sure.
I just taught the class Living Your Best Life for the homeowner candidates for Habitat for Humanity.
I remember, yep.
Had about 50 or 60 people on that call. And
cool.
One of the things we talked about was gratitude. And basically, this is Thanksgiving. So let's take the word and let's focus for a few minutes on what we're grateful for, what we're happy about, be hopeful. And so I got everybody contributing what they were grateful for. And there were some trends in today's world. It's so complicated, and yet the things people were grateful for, the overwhelming theme was, I am grateful to be alive. I'm grateful for my family, for my children. I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head. I'm
Especially
grateful
with Habitat.
I'm grateful for the Habitat program. There was a lot of that, giving me a chance to get to actually work on and move and own a home with a mortgage, but it's zero interest, and just having the opportunity to break that cycle of having to move every 6 months because the landlord is jacking up the rent, and not being able to let the kids go outside because it's so dangerous, and between the drugs and the shooting, you can't. It was just very, very nice to hear people talk. They're thankful for their health, and simple things. They weren't saying, "Oh, I'm so thankful I have a beautiful car" or anything like that. It was just very, very simple, having to do with being human.
Yeah. And that's really what Thanksgiving, I think, the intent is to be grateful, to thank ourselves for the great life that we have, and for all the small little blessings that we have all during the year. Yeah. This is a time for reflection. That's the way I've always looked at it, and that's why we visit our loved ones, so we can have that reflection together and have that bond that we don't have as much as we used to in the old days, I guess.
Yeah, well, if you get together with your family every weekend and you have that closeness, if you talk to everybody once a day or every couple of days, and today it's a matter of I have to make a list and remind myself to give a call to one of the family members just to touch base, and nobody expects to hear from anybody that frequently.
True enough. So things have definitely changed, and this is the time of year when we can reflect back and give thanks. I've certainly, every day we've been talking to each other how lucky we feel being here in the Durango area, being in the mountains, and living a life that we have dreamed of for the past few years, and now we're actually living it. So we're very thankful for that.
And I look out at a little snow on the ground, and I don't feel put off by it. I don't feel nervous about it. I understand what I need to do to live in this environment.
Yeah.
And it's a choice. So Very happy.
Been a
about
good
it.
choice. So that's the show for today. We have one more article in there. I think we'll just leave till next
Put her
week.
till next week. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for sticking around. I hope you guys have a great Thanksgiving too, and reflect on some of these things that we've been talking about. And we don't really have a lot of answers here, but
we have a lot of questions.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And that's okay, because we'll find the answers, and we're trying our best to be healthy and trying to give you some information that you can dig up your own solutions for. So,
Yeah, keep on shining, folks.
Yep.
Keep on being a beacon of light for other people, and do your best to focus on the positive and not the negative.
That's for sure. And we'll be back next week. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Be well.